And this result actually makes things a little bit more interesting. I do think that Bayern Munich are a massive favorite to win the title. It's theirs to lose now, right? And I mean, this is just a fact. But this makes things a little bit more interesting. Bayern Leverkusen win their game 2-1 against Union Berlin. I actually thought that was a very mature performance. Frimpong scores early. Union Berlin come back to Young, makes equalizes for them, right? And then Patrik Schick with the winner. Patrik Schick having a phenomenal form at the moment. You pointed it out already. That means Leverkusen are now 7 points behind Bayern Munich. That seems like a huge amount. But I think the year that Dortmund almost won the title, that the gap was about the same. And then Bayern Munich had issues in the second half of the season, right? And then Frankfurt 4-0 over Heidenheim. Marmoush again, fantastic. Now on 14 goals, I believe. So he keeps on scoring and scoring and scoring goals. And yeah, I mean, the Frankfurt story, let's start with that. 4 points behind Bayern Munich. Both of us are not 100% sure this is going to last, but right now it's fun. And, at the moment, Bayern Munich are maybe one defeat away of putting Frankfurt properly into this title race, which again, I'm not sure I'm believing it. I think it might be a bit of a mirage, but they're definitely a lot of fun to watch at the moment.
They are, and they obviously continue scoring goals for fun. I feel bad for Heidenheim. They strike me as a team who are just really, really struggling with playing lots of football, lots of competitions. They're not a club built for it. They're not a squad built for it. It's obviously uncharted waters for the head coach as well. I'm just kind of praying that they can basically drop out of Europe as quickly as possible and kind of get back to picking up points in the Bundesliga, because, it'd be a shame if they got relegated. But watching the goals from this game, it looked like men against boys. It looked like Frankfurt playing a lower division team in a Pokal match and then basically just strolling through defenders at this point. And it's obviously a shame, and I do really want to quantify this by saying, Heidenheim are obviously really up against it with injuries and the fact that they're competing against big teams like Chelsea, for example, in the Conference League. So it was just obviously a task that was obviously going to be too much for Heidenheim. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Frankfurt is such an interesting one. They keep scoring goals, and it's such a fascinating, theory or test or whatever you want to call it in terms of how far they can actually go. Because I remember when we were having this discussion about Union Berlin a few years ago, when they kind of shot up the table and everyone's like, well, are they genuine title contenders? And it's like, and people were saying, well, if you look at their XG and things like that, then they're not. And obviously they did kind of fall off. But the interesting thing for Frankfurt is that it's not so much that the weird thing is they're not really grinding out results. They're not as if they're, keeping a very tight defense and scoring 1 or 2 goals. They just keep scoring a bucket load of goals, and it's not even from one player. It's, it's your Hugo Larssons, it's your Canals, it's, Mario Götze stepping in last week. And then, of course, you've not got just one outstanding striker in Marmoush, but you've also got Hugo Ekitike. And I've seen Frankfurt play this season without Marmoush, and Ekitike has been running around the pitch causing havoc for defences. So they're certainly not a one-man team. They're probably not even a two-man team. They're a team with a lot of goals across the pitch. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they do in terms of, like actually scoring goals, and whether they can just score their way to a genuine title race. Because in these kind of typical situations, you would say, yeah, they score goals in the big games, but they kind of grind out results against the smaller clubs, and that's where they drop points. But when they're dropping points this season is when they come up against the better sides. It's your Dortmunds. They obviously lost Dortmund and Leverkusen. They drew 3-3 with Bayern Munich. It's a great result. But then they drew 1-1 with Union Berlin, who at the time probably had one of the best defences in the league. It's got a wee bit wonky since then, but I think Union's defence was really strong at the start of the year. And then after that, it was 7-2 against Bochum, 3-2 against Stuttgart, 4-0 against Heidenheim. Curiously, a 1-0 win against Werder Bremen, who are also a very attacking team. So having watched that game, both teams could have scored 3 goals. So maybe that's just a kind of statistical anomaly. But the interesting thing here, I think, is the question that Frankfurt are posing is, can we basically beat all but 3 of these teams in this league by outscoring them week to week? And is that enough for us to be within touching distance of Bayern Munich? And the classic thing is that defenses build, attacks win games, but defenses win titles. And what that basically means is that you can't outscore a bad defense. And I do kind of stand to, I do think that's a truism in football, but Frankfurt just seem capable of scoring goals from anywhere. And it is really quite remarkable. It's fun. It's exciting. And as they showed against Bayern Munich, they're not scared to go get up against the very best teams. So despite, defeats to Dortmund and Leverkusen, they're in excellent shape. And unless both Marmoush and Hugo Ekitike were to pick up serious injuries, then I'm not really sure how this ends, Manu.
Yeah, I mean, let the fun continue. I watched this game today with a lot of interest. I watched Heidenheim's game against Chelsea midweek, and I actually thought Heidenheim played really well in that game too. And this is the issue that Heidenheim have at the moment. And you pointed it out that they play really good football in a lot of these games. It's just that attrition is wearing them down, right? You play against the Chelsea side where, yeah, okay, Chelsea show up with the B team, but the B team still includes like Christopher and Kunku, right? It's hard, and like Chelsea can rotate these teams because they have, it feels like 3 squads, right? With lots of quality players. I mean, some of these guys that Chelsea signed are worth more than the entire Heidenheim team together. That's not me trolling Chelsea. That's a fact. You can look this up on Transfermarkt. That's a fact. And that's really, really difficult. And then for them to play a really hard, tough Thursday game, where emotionally you're really high, right? Because you did so well. You kept Chelsea off the score sheet for the first half. It took Chelsea quite a long time in the second half to finally score. Even then, you're still in the match. And so you have this almost kind of like celebration of a game. And then that the reality comes, and then Eintracht Frankfurt come to town, and to town literally because it is a town. And you then have to shift gears to your day-to-day Bundesliga operations, and it's a really tricky balance from playing in Europe and then playing your normal Bundesliga games. And I actually thought at the time Heidenheim played really well in this game too. It's just the batteries are empty. It's just and then on top of that, Frankfurt is a team that for years now has been playing in Europe. I mean, they have. People compare it to Union Berlin. We have done this on the podcast, but you have to remember that Eintracht Frankfurt, they are veterans of playing in Europe and in the Bundesliga. They have done it for almost a decade now, and they have done it by going also really deep into European competitions, plus winning one, right? So it's not like yes, these players are different, and there's turnover in the squad, all of that, but eventually the culture of that sets in. You see that at Bayern Munich. You're just used to playing midweek, weekend. Like if that becomes the norm for you as a football club, then you're used to it. And then you have veterans in there like Mario Götze that have seen literally everything, right? And so that's hard to, I think then it becomes a really hard team to overcome. And I think that's also what keeps this Frankfurt team going. They're playing well in Europe as well. And for them, it's almost the opposite, right? Going to Denmark to play like someone like Midtjylland is probably more of a slug for them than to play in the Bundesliga at the moment, right? Which is the bread and butter. But they're doing it so remarkably well, and so in a way that is just so very professional, and that can go a long way, in my opinion. And it's really fascinating to see whether they can keep pace. And look, the way you win a Bundesliga title is that if you dare when Bayern Munich falter. That's how Stuttgart beat them to second place, and that's how Leverkusen won the title, right? They were just there. They won the games that mattered, and in Stuttgart case to finish second, they beat Bayern Munich. And I think I'm a big proponent. You have to beat them at least once, right? You can draw them in one of the games, but you have to beat them at least once. And Stuttgart and Leverkusen both did it. And that's why they ultimately finished ahead of them. And I think that is what it comes down to. And I personally don't think Leverkusen are out of this race yet either, Stefan. They had a wobble in the beginning of the season. They really kind of felt like they had to deal with getting used to Champions League football and Bundesliga football at the same time. But in recent weeks, they have looked a lot more stable. The 4-0 defeat to Liverpool aside, but look, everyone loses to Liverpool right now. There's no shame in that. But they just look way more stable. In this game, Florian Wirtz starts off the bench. I thought they looked good regardless. And then Wirtz, of course, comes on and basically fires the ball at Schick to put it across the line, right? And I think that ultimately, and Alonso and Kanishaka have kind of laughed at Uli Hoeneß saying that Bayern Munich have won the title already. They kind of laughed at that, and they said, like, look, our job now is to win every single game so that we're there in case they do falter. And I think that's all you need to do at this stage. If Bayern Munich win every single one of the games and don't drop points anymore, then they will win the championship. But these other teams, if they want to have a chance of winning the title or make this interesting, they just have to be thereabouts. And I think in Leverkusen's case, that's probably quite possible.
Yeah. Leverkusen were interesting against Union Berlin. I was a little disappointed that Florian Wirtz actually didn't start the game, but he proved to be the match winner. He basically came on and won the game single-handedly for Leverkusen in the second half. They were very flat in the first half. They basically scored in the first minute when Grimaldo and Frimpong kind of beat the really high line from Union Berlin, which is quite uncharacteristic. Basically beat the offside trap. They run through a goal, tap the ball to the back of the net. And then Leverkusen basically spent the first half just sitting extremely deep. Union Berlin score a somewhat fortuitous goal, I think. And all of a sudden, basically Leverkusen have to start again. So then Xabi Alonso obviously goes in at half time. He says, "Oh, right, okay, first go get warmed up. You're going to have to win the game for us." And we've all seen this one play out 100 times. And as she said, the goal is worth checking out on YouTube because Wirtz fires in this remarkable cross from the right wing and it pings off Patrik Schick in the back post and it basically cannons off his chest into the back of the net. You could, they say there's an old saying in Britain that a player who can pass the ball tremendously well could hit a ball could hit a 2-pinch with a ball like 100 yards away. A 2-pinch like an old coin from back in the day, and it basically means remarkable accuracy, and that's basically what Florian Wirtz did. And we're having this chat about him and Wirtz and Musiala in the chat and during their Klassiker, and I really do have to hand it to Florian Wirtz. He does this time and time again for Leverkusen, and this is such a good example of why young players who want to be the best players in the world have to go play for clubs, with all due respect to Leverkusen, who maybe aren't used to having world-class players, because there's been so many occasions over the last 2 seasons where Wirtz has basically had to dig really deep and just win these games for Leverkusen almost single-handedly. And time again, it just shows how much of a world-class talent he's becoming. It's like watching, I hate drawing the comparisons to Messi, but it's like watching what Messi used to do at his peak from Barcelona. If they were in a pickle, he would just come on, or he wouldn't come on if he's already on the pitch, but he would just do something. He'd either score a goal, set up a goal, he'd draw a penalty or whatever. He just does it time and time again, and it really is what I adore about him, because he's just a great problem solver. He's and fundamentally he's a match winner. That's his key thing. He just wins games. He's a big game player, and he just gets it done. But yeah, in terms of the actual title race, you're right. Leverkusen only 6 points off Bayern. They still have to play Bayern at the Bayer Arena, which is really important. And
yeah,
it's really interesting that they now have this Pokal game this week to kind of play off, because the way that Leverkusen look right now, you would think that they maybe fancy their chances against Bayern, who obviously don't have Harry Kane for this game. And we'll obviously cover it in the bonus show this week, but it might be an interesting kind of test to see where these two teams really are, because as we said, Leverkusen look back to their best, more or less full strength, everyone's kind of fit, everyone's ready to go. Patrik Schick's in that team, and we really can't overstate how remarkable he's been. He's got 6 goals in the last 4 games for Leverkusen, and he's basically doing everything that Boniface wasn't doing at the start of the season. Boniface obviously had an injury. Don't know if something was bothering him. It's just maybe his mind was off the game, but he looked cumbersome. He wasn't getting around the pitch. He wasn't linking up with players. He was completely uncomposed on and off the ball. And Schick has just come in, and I think when Patrik Schick's at his height, when he's fully fit, I think he's one of the best strikers in German football. I think he's top class European striker. I really do. I've drawn comparisons to Robert Lewandowski in the past, and I honestly stand by them, because I think when he's on form, he can do anything. He's a big guy. He can dribble by players. He can score from distance. He can win headers. He's a tremendous finisher. But most of all, he's really good at link-up play. As soon as he came back into that team, Wirtz just kind of turned back into that world-class player, and they started winning games again. And it'll be really interesting to see what they can do against Bayern. And yeah, I completely agree with you. As Leverkusen look right now, they look capable of beating Bayern, and if so, then they absolutely stand a chance of still going toe to toe with them in the league if they can match that with consistency.
Yeah, I think because of that reason, the German Cup game on Tuesday will be quite consequential. Obviously, it has no bearings on the Bundesliga table or anything like that, but I think it's a good yardstick to see where we're at. So yeah, looking forward to that game.